The single most infuriating thing about the Wheel of Time, the constant, grinding, soul-crushing war between men and women, is not a flaw. It is not a product of Robert Jordan's blind spots or lazy writing. It is the most deliberately constructed satirical device in modern epic fantasy. And here's the part that's going to make you put down your phone and really think. Jordan designed it to make you feel exactly as trapped and exhausted as his characters do. He wanted you to feel that frustration. That's the whole point. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let's start with the man himself. Robert Jordan, real name James Oliver Rigney Jr., was a Vietnam combat veteran from Charleston, South Carolina, who holds a degree in physics from the Citadel, a notoriously conservative military college. He spent years writing pulp sword and sorcery before sitting down in 1984 with an ambition that was frankly absurd. Write a fantasy series that would synthesize the entire tradition of world mythology, Arthurian legend, Norse myth, Hindu cosmology, the Tao Te Ching, into one unified story about time itself being a wheel that turns and repeats forever. The Eye of the World came out in 1990, right in the middle of one of the most contentious cultural debates America had seen in decades, the gender wars of the late 80s and early 90s. You've got male. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Thelma and Louise, Murphy Brown. The national conversation was obsessed with the question of whether men and women were fundamentally different species who could never quite understand each other. Jordan was soaking in all of it while building a world, and it shows on every single page. And here's why this matters right now, today, in whatever year you're watching this. We are still having this exact conversation. Every online discourse about how men think versus how women think, every men will literally do this instead of going to therapy meme, every women be shopping joke. That is the cultural water we are swimming in. Jordan looked at this dynamic 35 years ago and said, what happens if I build an entire civilization around this mutual incomprehension and show it to its absolute, logical, catastrophic extreme? What does it look like when an entire world is organized around the premise that men and women are fundamentally unknowable to each other? Here is the core of what Jordan is doing, and I need you to hold this carefully. He is not endorsing the gender war. He is satirizing gender essentialism. When every man in the series thinks women are mysterious, irrational, and impossible to understand, and every woman thinks men are pig-headed, reckless, and refuse to listen, Jordan is not nodding along. He is holding up a mirror. He is showing us what a world looks like when everyone commits fully to the bit of the other gender is just fundamentally different from me. And the answer is, it looks exhausting and tragic and a little bit ridiculous. Which is exactly what you're feeling right now. Consider the architecture of his world for a moment. In Ranland, women hold institutional power in ways that men simply don't. The Aes Sedai are the most powerful political force on the continent, an all-female organization that has guided and manipulated nations for 3,000 years. The White Tower in Tar Valon functions essentially as a shadow government. Men who can channel the one power are hunted down and gentled, rendered unable to use their power, because the last man who could do what Rand can do literally broke the world. The power structure is matriarchal in the deepest sense. Jordan deliberately inverted the fantasy default. And yet, and this is the joke, neither side can see clearly because of it. The men resent the Aes Sedai's power and respond with bluster and stubbornness. The Aes Sedai, accustomed to deference, treat men as well-meaning children who need managing. Every single gender-based conflict in the series is downstream of this fundamental mutual condescension. They are both, as Jordan writes it, performing versions of what they think their gender requires of them. The farm boys from the Two Rivers think they have to protect the women. The women from the Two Rivers think they have to manage the men, and they are all making each other miserable doing it. Sound familiar? Look at what this dynamic does to Rand specifically, and I'll try to stay spoiler light here. Rand al'Thor begins the series as an open, warm, genuinely kind young man. As the books progress and the pressures of his destiny pile on, one of the things that accelerates his psychological unraveling is his inability to communicate honestly across gender lines. He literally cannot ask the women around him for help in a straightforward way. They literally cannot give it to him directly. They circle each other in this exhausting dance of half information and wounded pride, and the fate of the world hangs in the balance. Jordan is screaming at us through the page, "Look how much damage this costs. Look at the price of this stubbornness." Now let's talk about Nynaeve, because she is the most important character in this conversation, and she doesn't get nearly enough credit. Nynaeve Almira starts the series as perhaps the most entrenched gender war participant of anyone, bossy, suspicious of men, convinced she knows better than everyone around her. But her arc, slowly, sometimes painfully slowly, is about dismantling that armor. Her greatest moments of growth come specifically when she stops performing the role of woman who doesn't need men and starts actually connecting with people as individuals. Jordan gives us, in Nynaeve, a roadmap out of the trap. He's showing us the work required to escape it. And then there's Perrin. You mentioned the dread you felt watching Perrin fall for fail, that sinking feeling that here was a character you loved, about to be infected by what you perfectly called sexism disease. Here's what I want you to sit with. That dread you felt is structurally intentional. Jordan wants you to mourn the loss of the uncomplicated Perrin. He wants you to watch someone warm and thoughtful get pulled into the performance of masculinity that his world demands of him. The Perrin-fail dynamic is not Jordan writing romance badly. It's Jordan showing us exactly how the pattern reproduces itself, generation to generation, culture to culture. It spreads because it's what everyone around you is doing. I want to stop and name something directly. Jordan has said in interviews that he deliberately wanted female characters who were fully human, not men in female bodies, not fantasy archetypes, but complicated, sometimes infuriating, fully realized people. He also acknowledged he didn't always succeed. Some of the more repetitive women straightening skirts and sniffing shorthand is genuinely a failure of execution. But the architecture underneath it, the structural argument about what gender essentialism does to a civilization, that is coherent and intentional. You are supposed to be frustrated. The discomfort is the medicine. This is not a new literary trick. Jane Austen did the same thing in Pride and Prejudice, though with considerably more wit and considerably fewer chapters. Darcy and Elizabeth's early relationship is an absolute masterclass in two intelligent people being absolutely wrong about each other, because they're both performing what their class and gender demands. The whole novel turns on the moment Elizabeth realizes she's been doing the same thing she hated Darcy for. Jordan is working in that tradition, using the comedy and tragedy of mutual misreading to expose how much of our conflict is performed rather than genuine. Compare Jordan to Tolkien for a moment. Tolkien's Middle-earth has almost no women in it: Eowyn, Galadriel, Arwen, and that's basically your list. There's no gender conflict because there are barely two genders sharing the same space. George R.R. Martin took the opposite approach. Gender in Westeros is primarily about power and violence, about who controls bodies and inheritance. Jordan staked out a third position. What if gender conflict was banal, petty, and omnipresent? What if it wasn't dramatic oppression, but 1,000 small daily acts of mutual exasperation? In some ways, that's a more honest portrait of how gender dynamics actually function in most people's lives. Think about how we talk about gender online right now. The entire discourse of men will literally stare at the wall for 3 hours instead of processing emotions, or women are just biologically more empathetic. All of that is exactly the Wheel of Time's gender war, just with better memes. We have built an entire internet culture around performing gender essentialism and calling it insight. Jordan was writing about that 40 years before TikTok made it into a content format. The frustration you feel reading Rand insist he has to protect Egwene from information she desperately needs, you should feel it, because it's real and it's everywhere. Here is where it gets really interesting for your specific reading experience. You said when you're in the ways, or Tellerandhyad, or exploring new cultures, it's mesmerizing, and then a man and woman walk into the same room and everything stops. That contrast is doing something. Jordan is using the wonder and beauty of his world as the positive charge and the gender conflict as the negative. He is quite literally showing you what could be, and then showing you what gets in the way. The beautiful world keeps almost coming into focus, and the human stubbornness keeps blurring it. That's not accidental structure. That is craft. Here's the part I bet you didn't know. Robert Jordan's wife, Harriet McDougall, was not just his partner, she was his editor, and she was one of the most powerful and respected editors in American publishing. She edited everything from Thomas Wolfe to The Forever War. She was, by every account, the person Jordan trusted most with his work and with the portrayal of his female characters specifically. Many of the women in Wheel of Time are drawn from Harriet, her directness, her competence, her refusal to be managed. When Jordan says he was trying to write women as fully human, he had a very specific human in mind as the template. And here's something even more interesting. Jordan died in 2007 before finishing the series. He left detailed notes and outlines, and his wife Harriet chose Brandon Sanderson to complete it, specifically because Sanderson had demonstrated, in his own work, that he could write women as full people. And Sanderson has been very open about the fact that finishing Wheel of Time changed how he writes gender dynamics in his own books. The Stormlight Archive's exploration of gender and communication, particularly in the relationship between Kaladin and Shallan, carries clear fingerprints of what Jordan was trying to do, filtered through a different generation's sensibility. Here is the honest answer to your question: does it get better or worse? It gets both. Books 7, 8, and 9 are widely considered the most frustrating in the series. The gender conflict peaks, the pacing slows, and the stubbornness reaches almost operatic levels. But, and this is important, the payoff that begins in Book 11 and culminates in Books 13 and 14 is extraordinary precisely because of how much damage was accumulated. Characters who spent 1,000 pages being unable to talk to each other finally do. And because Jordan showed us the full cost of the wall between them, the moment it comes down hits with a weight that a faster, gentler series could never have earned. So let's bring this together. The Wheel of Time's gender war is not the series failing to be what it could be. It is the series doing exactly what it intends to do. Jordan built a world of astonishing beauty, cultures, cosmologies, mythologies, the grand scope that you love, and then populated it with people who are too busy performing their gender to fully inhabit it. The tragedy is not incidental. It is the thesis. We are all living in a world more beautiful and interesting than we can fully access, and a significant portion of what blocks us is exactly this: the scripts we run about who people are before we actually look at them. Here is the thing that should reframe your reading entirely. When you hate the gender war in Wheel of Time, you are agreeing with Robert Jordan. Your frustration is not a response to a failure in the text. It is the correct response to a text that is working. You are feeling exactly what Jordan intended a thoughtful reader to feel. The discomfort is the argument. And in a series spanning 14 books and over 4 million words, Jordan needed you to feel that discomfort long enough and deeply enough that, when the characters finally start breaking the pattern, you feel it in your bones. The question isn't whether Jordan always executed this perfectly. He didn't. Some of those sniffing passages really are just autopilot. But the architecture is sound. And knowing it's there changes the read. Instead of gritting your teeth through another argument between Rand and a woman who should just tell him the truth already, you can watch it as the performance it is, two people who, in a better world, in the world you keep glimpsing in the ways and in the dream world, could be allies. And then you understand what the series is, at its deepest level, actually mourning. If this reframing changed how you're thinking about Wheel of Time, then you're going to love our deep dive into how Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness imagined a world with no gender at all, and what it reveals about everything we assume is natural. Because where Jordan shows us the cost of gender essentialism from the inside, Le Guin shows us what we might be without it. Same question, different angle, and honestly, between the two of them, they cover more ground than a semester of gender studies. Link is right up there. We'll see you in the next one.